haven't uploaded anything in a while, so I'm producing this video to explain what's been going on with Super Fangame Maker in detail. Firstly, the game is now called New Super Fangame Maker. This is because I want to rebrand the project so I can start on a clean slate. It's still the same game with the same vision and goals, but the old Super Fangame Maker was received very poorly, and I want to separate that iteration from what I'm currently working on. As far as actual changes to the gameplay goes, the most obvious immediate change is the new GUI. It was one of the first changes I made to the game since its initial release at Nintendo Community Fangame Convention 2015. Fundamentally, it's very similar. The tile bar is almost identical, but the buttons for scrolling up and down are now placed in the center where they're more accessible. The menu aesthetics now have a sort of construction orangish theme with Super Mario bricks accenting it. Some of the buttons look like item boxes too. Right now, there are 4 rows of tiles to use, but there will probably be more in the final product. I'm also planning on implementing a GUI for customizing which tiles are placed on which rows like Super Mario Maker has. I've got the backends for that system all in place and have for a while, but the actual functionality hasn't been implemented yet. The level size is different too. It's the same length, which is the same length as Super Mario Maker's levels, but it now also has the same height as Super Mario Maker's levels. The level height in the old demo earned a lot of complaints, so I wanted to make sure to extend it to a reasonable height this time. There are also a lot of new tiles. The first row is mostly the same as the old demos by default, but I've added in ladders and springs. Springs function the same as they do in Super Mario Maker, but they replace vines. In fact, if you put a ladder inside an item box and then hit the box, it sprouts a vine which climbs up until it hits a block or the top of the screen. It also sometimes has a special sprite at the top. 2 of those special tops will be animated, but they aren't right now. The coins now have a new sprite, which is more accurate to the original Super Mario Bros. I was kind of reluctant to not use a spinning coin sprite, but a lot of people kept asking me to change it, so I eventually did. I've also added in some new enemies. Spinies are pretty obvious, they just function as you'd expect them to. You can't jump on them, but they can be killed by fireballs and shells and stuff. I also re-implemented bullet bill cannons. I always planned for the cannons to be implemented, but I couldn't get them to function properly in the editor back before the game's initial release, so I removed them. As many players pointed out, I accidentally left the bullet bills themselves in the tile bar where they couldn't be used to do anything and just filled an empty space. Now, you can put pretty much anything you want inside of the cannons. If you put a Buzzy Beetle in, that's another new enemy. The cannon will shoot out the shell and you can wear it as a helmet. I guess I never really planned to add this feature to Fangame Maker, but a guy named DS Davy Senna brought up a really well thought out point as to why I should implement it, so yeah, I did. I'm planning on adding in a feature for you to choose what the helmet looks like. I'll probably also make this work with the spiny shells and Koopa shells. I know Koopa shells couldn't be worn in the original game, but I saw it in that Dorkly video and thought it was cool. Maybe I'll just make it turn Mario into Shell Mario from New Super Mario Bros. I don't know yet. There are also dry bones. They do what you'd expect, and they have their Super Mario Maker sprite, though it's now recolored to use the Super Mario Bros. Color palette. I also added in a Spring Koopa, Laser Koopa, and Hyper Boo. These are 2 enemies from Super Mario Bros. Dimensions, which is a pretty popular fan game. There are other enemies in that game which I'm also going to be adding in. I might have these not be their own dedicated tiles and instead have the player drag an item or something onto a base enemy in the editor. I always, and I do mean always, like as far back as when I first started entertaining the idea of this fan game, wanted to have the player able to drag a Hyper Boo onto Mario and give him the ability to dimension switch into a secondary level. I've also added in some bosses now. At first, it was just regular Bowser, but then Medic Robot sprited a dry Bowser, so I added him in too. Then I added in that unused Peach Bowser sprite from Super Mario Maker, which was, at one point, used with that CRT Mega Mushroom thing. There's also, way more costumes now. I'm not going to list them all out, but this one, Roushi, is probably not going to be in the final product for a couple reasons. One of them being, I don't like how his sprites turned out. I could always redo them, but I'm not so sure that I'm gonna want to be using someone else's FC ref without permission. I guess I could always ask Hypernova I don't know. Some costumes will have 8-bit alternates to them. The ones currently implemented definitely won't be the only ones, but not everything will have an alt. Also, there are now level themes. Right now, I've only got the grassland, the underground, and the ice world, but I'm probably going to add more over time. They do take quite a bit of time to implement, so they're not my highest priority right now, though. There are 2 new buttons down here. This one changes the grid because a lot of people complain about it, and this one toggles Mario's onion skin. On the topic of minor aesthetic changes, I've also added in a background and automatically generated scenery. The background currently has parallax, even on the Super Mario Bros. Skin theme, and I might change that, and it only supports 1 parallax layer. The parallax is also kind of imprecise, so I'm going to have to make some changes to that. The scenery is generated just like in Super Mario Maker. You place some terrain tiles and it pops up. The start to end bar on the right is no longer centered, but it's not functional right now. It will work eventually, of course, it just doesn't right now. You can also drag tiles around now. You could do that with some tiles in the old version, but it looks much nicer now. It doesn't work on Mario yet, and dragging terrain tiles with scenery on it deletes the scenery, which is inconvenient. Fixing all that is on the to-do list, though. You can still change which skin theme you're using. I've disabled almost all of the skin themes for now, though, and the 2 remaining ones both have new graphics for the menu. The Super Mario Bros. Skin theme just needed a more streamlined graphic, and the Hello Engine skin theme is now called Hello Engine 3, so that it's more clear that it's based off of the most infamous and iconic version of Hello Engine. In fact, I've now got Hello Engine 3 physics code directly ported into Fangame Maker so I can be as authentic as possible. It's kind of buggy right now, but I have been slowly fixing it up. The Hello Engine skin theme now has Veggies. You can pull them up with the run button just like in Hello Engine, and then throw them. You can even put enemies and items inside, so those get pulled up. I'm going to gradually re-implement some of the skin themes of the previous version, but not all of them will be returning because some will be replaced by others. I know for sure that Abducted Galaxy and Q-Nova will not be returning, but I plan on implementing a skin theme for Super Mario Flashback and possibly Super Mario Bros. 2, which will also have Veggies, obviously. Also, I plan on some skin themes being able to use costumes as well, but only a few of the costumes will be accessible on a few skin themes. All skin themes use the same icons in the tile bar right now. I might change that in the future, but I've kind of gotten used to it by now, and I think it does have a sort of charm. There's also an options menu on the side. The graphic is going to be changed unless I remove that button entirely, which I might. I don't think it's necessary, really. I just have each submenu, if it dropped down, get its own dedicated button on that side, which would probably be easier to use. The transition between playing and editing is a lot smoother. In the old version, it would cut directly to a more zoomed in thing, but now the editor GUI just slides away. Super Mario Maker had a compromise between the two, but recreating that effect would be impossible unless I start over and build the engine fundamentally different. There's also a cool little HUD which displays the countdown timer and coin count. It looks different depending on which skin theme is selected, but both versions still need fine-tuning. Placing terrain is very different now. Instead of placing a block which then gets dragged out, you place each piece tile by tile. Unlike most other Mario Maker fan games, there is an automatic visual tiling system, so you don't have to worry about tediously making sure each block has the right sprite. This applies to pipes and bullet bill cannons too. I plan on implementing playable characters other than Mario as well. I'm definitely going to add Luigi, Peach, and Toad, but maybe Bowser and Nabbit if I can find graphics for them. They'll still be able to wear costumes, even of themselves, but they won't be able to wear 8-bit costumes of themselves because those would obviously use the same sprites. That's pretty much everything there is in regards to the game itself. I've got a new title screen though. It's based on NEX Remix, obviously. Instead of miscellaneous NES sprites flying about, though, I've got sprites from Fangame Maker. These are usually Mario sprites or costumes, but sometimes there are other things. There are going to be other options here than just courses, such as a thing for you to view all the costumes like trophies with text biographies of them. I've also talked about this feature called the Mixer before. If you happen to know what that is, that's cool, but I'm not going to explain it in detail here because I've decided to remove it from the game. The golden statue in the center of this background is Thunder Dragon. Be sure not to touch it. The farthest backdrop away is the background from the scene in Abducted Toad, where Toad gets abducted, and that weird messy thing on the side is hard to read right now, but it's based on the zigzaggy thing on MFGG's main site, and the frontmost platform is just a flat area with some construction-esque stuff. This whole thing used to have color, but I replaced it with gradients to fit the NES Remix aesthetic. The level below this takes you to the level select where you can load your levels, but it's very work in progress. The game is definitely more than 50% done, but there are still a lot of features to work on and a lot of bugs to fix. I plan on adding in a lot more stuff, but for now, I guess that's all there is to talk about. At least all the major stuff. So, the end.